Good morning, everybody, and welcome out to this week's edition of the Infusionsoft Mastermind webinar. My name is Scott Richens. I'm excited to be here with you today as we talk about Infusionsoft and QuickBooks. We've got a whole bunch of you here on the call, and as we're getting started, I want to find out how many of you are currently aware of the QuickBooks connection that we have in Infusionsoft, or am I speaking about brand new stuff to you here? And I say QuickBooks connection because I'm not calling it an integration. We're going to be talking about some things today that they're fairly technical. Okay, I really want to start off here by being very specific and very cautious. In a previous life, in a previous career and job that I had, I spent probably more time in QuickBooks than most of you have. Unless you're an accountant, you've got me beat. I worked in the back end of QuickBooks a lot, so my expertise doesn't lie specifically in the accounting portion, but my expertise in QuickBooks lies in this particular the particular topic that we're going to be talking about here today, which is importing and exporting data into QuickBooks. And I have spent hours upon hours upon hours doing all of that kind of work. So I'm excited that Jordan asked me to be here today to share with you guys, to tap into that. I was laughing last night and this past week as I've been working within QuickBooks again. It's been a couple years since I've done this. So kind of felt like going back to the good old days there when I used to work in QuickBooks a whole bunch. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. There is a feature within Infusionsoft that can be turned on. And this is something that we ask you to sign a waiver before we turn it on, because it is something that if you don't do it correctly and you aren't educated and aware of the possible implications from doing it incorrectly, it can cause some trouble. It can cause some serious pain to your QuickBooks file. Okay, so I put that out there as a caution. It can all be avoided by working with backups properly. So everything I'm going to show you today, I'm going to show you how to do some exports from Infusionsoft, and all that's a-okay. Anytime you are about to import a file into QuickBooks, we're going to be using something called a QuickBooks IIF file. It's a unique file type for QuickBooks. It's IIF, stands for Intuit Interchange Format. It's a unique, ugly looking spreadsheet that you can import into QuickBooks. Here's the thing. When you import something into Infusionsoft, we've got a nice rollback button. If you screw up, not really a big deal, you can roll it back. QuickBooks does not have a rollback option on these imports. So I'm going to show you how to do some things today. I'm going to show you how to set up this export from Infusionsoft, how to export that. Unfortunately, I don't have a computer available here that I can connect and demonstrate the actual import. I know that's important, so I will screencast that later and include it with the recording as an additional download so you can see the other half. But anytime you go to QuickBooks and you go to do an import, it is imperative, I cannot stress enough, you have to run a backup, because with these types of imports, it's not just because it's coming from Infusionsoft. I've worked with these for years. I'm telling you, it is imperative that you always run a backup before you do an import. So that's the number one thing that I want you to take away from today is backup, backup, backup. Always back up your file before you run an import, regardless of if it's coming from Infusionsoft or otherwise. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is QuickBooks and Infusionsoft. Now, there are some resources that I want to make sure that you have. And we are going to go to, I've got a lot of stuff open here today. We are going to go to the Help Center. Okay, you can actually go directly to the user's guide at ug.infusionsoft.com. And if you want to walk through this with me, let's do this. Let's go to help.infusionsoft.com and you can click on Find an Instant Answer. And when you click through on that then redirects you to ug.infusionsoft.com. Within here, there are a lot of articles that we have. I think there's 4 or 5 articles about QuickBooks. And you can search for QuickBooks to find those articles. Now, how does Infusionsoft integrate with QuickBooks is one of the first articles we want to look at, and here's why. when you go to this particular page, we give you some of this information. You've got to back up your QuickBooks data file before each import. And then we give you right here, QuickBooks IIF user disclaimer. If you want this feature that I'm going to show you how to use, if you want this feature turned on, then you'll need to download this file, and you can sign the file. Let me open it here. You can sign the file and return it to us. Oops, it looks like I need to get the logo here updated as well. You can fax this back to us, and then we will turn that feature on. Okay, again, this is something that we're just telling you. You've got to back up your QuickBooks. You've got to know that. That's not something that we can help if you don't back up with it. Now, let's go over to Infusionsoft. Once you've turned that on, what ends up happening is you have a new option here within e-commerce. There's a couple spots we got to configure it. The first one is here within e-commerce. We can go down to the settings portion here. And you have a new section here called QuickBooks. Now, QuickBooks is awesome. QuickBooks allows us to do a whole lot of accounting that Infusionsoft does not do. QuickBooks is phenomenal at what it does. Infusionsoft is phenomenal at what it does, but they're not designed to do what one another do. So how do we make them talk? How do we make it so we do not have to do double data entry? How do we make it so we can get the power of accounting from QuickBooks, but the automation and the sales ease and online sales of Infusionsoft? Well, we start to connect those and translate between the two here within this QuickBooks setup portion. What this enables us to do and what this is asking for is for us to specify the accounts that information needs to be transitioned to. Now, when you get to this particular person, let me throw out a couple other things. I just got a couple questions coming through that reminded me of this. When I was working with QuickBooks before, I was working with QuickBooks Enterprise Solutions. So Nick, you're asking about QuickBooks Enterprise. This works, the IIF file imports work with QuickBooks Enterprise. It works with QuickBooks Pro and Premier. So you can utilize this import with all three of those. QuickBooks Online, their basic online edition, I am told you cannot import an IIF file to that. So if you're utilizing QuickBooks Online, they have not enabled those imports. I did some research last night, and it appears that there are some third-party tools that will allow you to take an IIF file like we create here and then import that into the QuickBooks Online version. It'll do the translation for you. But our export here is designed to export into the unique QuickBooks IIF file format, which at this point can only be imported into the desktop versions of the desktop versions of QuickBooks. Sorry, words aren't coming out right there. So that's one disclaimer that I want to put out here as well is at this point, for a direct import from Infusionsoft to QuickBooks, it does need to be one of their desktop versions. Now, when it comes to this particular portion, as we're starting to talk about these top options, invoice debit account, payment debit account, credit debit account, what does this all mean? Well, if you're not an accountant, I am going to stress to you here, you need to get your accountant involved. Because what we're beginning to specify, let me split my screen here. What we're beginning to specify are the accounts that all this information is going to translate to within your chart of accounts in QuickBooks. The debit accounts right here, if there's another article that we have, how do I set up the QuickBooks integration after I activate the IIF export? So we have to turn it on for you first. But then what you need to do is you need to come into Infusionsoft and you need to map these connections. So map Infusionsoft to QuickBooks account and non-standard product types. So we're setting up our basic accounts right here for different types of transactions that are going to occur. And again, talk to your accountants on these. But your invoice debit account, this one is really referencing your accounts receivable. Your payment debit account is beginning to reference either your undeposited funds or your bank name. Now, here's what happens, and here's my recommendation when you're setting these up. It is imperative. I'm stressing a lot of things here. This is not a simple thing. You just have to be, it's simple. You just have to be very specific with it. These IIF files do not allow for any sort of error. When you're typing in these invoice accounts or these payment accounts, whatever these account names are, these account names have to match exactly what exists within QuickBooks. They have to match exactly. There can't be extra spaces. There can't be extra periods. They have to match exactly. So what my recommendation to you would be is to go into QuickBooks. What you can do from QuickBooks is you can, from your QuickBooks list, you can click File in the upper left-hand corner and then go down to Utilities. Okay, again, I apologize. I don't have a QuickBooks file here or a QuickBooks program available to demonstrate this right now, but I will demonstrate the invoice in addition, or the import in an additional video that I will post along with this recording. But if you have QuickBooks open, what you can do is you can go to QuickBooks File, and then you can scroll down to a section that says Utilities. Now, Utilities will open up a second window, and you have Import and Export as options. The first thing I would recommend that you do is export your chart of accounts. It asks you if you want to export lists, and you can export those lists. I would go ahead and export that list, and you can choose to export it as an IIF file or an Excel file. Either one works. I've got one of those created right here. I exported an IIF file. Now, when you go to open an IIF file, it will always, your computers don't know what to open that with. So many times when you go to open that, it will ask you to select a program with which to open it. I recommend that you open it with Microsoft Excel, and then you can read it. And you'll notice here there's a bunch of goofy information on it, okay? This is kind of the inner workings of the IIF files. It's got some header information here. And then right within here it says name. This is our chart of account names. What I would recommend you do in order to make sure that you are typing in exactly the same name here as it is in QuickBooks, I would recommend that you simply come to this particular portion. So let me see, undeposited funds. If I were to be pasting or typing undeposited funds here, I would literally copy and paste. Make sure that you copy this directly and then just paste it right here. And that makes sure that you don't have any errors as far as spacing or otherwise. Again, specificity is the key here. Specificity is the key. So you're going to do that with each of your QuickBooks accounts right here. If you have questions on those, they're listed right over here. Invoice debit account represents your QuickBooks, your accounts receivable payment. Debit account represents your undeposited funds or bank name. Okay, the credit debit account and refund debit account, I noticed this week that those weren't listed in here, so I will get those added to this particular article, but those represent your credit memos. And then the rest of the information down here is beginning to represent your where do your sales hit. Okay, so payment credit, credit account, and refund credit account are it's representing the account that's updated or that's debited there when your accounts receivable receives a credit. So when we're looking at our T-charts and it credits somewhere and debits somewhere else, this is the counterpart to your invoice debit account. Okay, again, you need to talk to your accountants on these. I highly encourage you to involve your accountant on this. This is something that I need to make sure you understand. We cannot help you with at Infusionsoft. If you call into our technical support team, we can't tell you which accounts that you need to use. So that's something that I'm going to ask you to agree with me on here. We can't help you when you call our technical team. Our technical support team, we can't help you by getting into your QuickBooks account and tell you, okay, here's the account that you need to utilize, because everybody's charts of accounts are different. So you're going to need to work with an accountant on that to determine which ones that you need to use, but then you can simply copy and paste that account name and paste it right here. Now, once you've gone through this top portion, we begin to get into the next section here, which is talking about our non-standard product types. Now, I'm going to take you in a moment and we're going to map each of our individual products. I'll show you how to do that. But what this is now doing is allowing us to map any additional charges or set defaults for any products that you have not yet mapped. What this is doing, every time you create a product in QuickBooks, you specify a chart of accounts that it will credit or debit. Anytime there's a charge, if it's a line for taxes or shipping or finance charges or the product or service that you're selling, you always, when you create that in your item list, you always specify an account in your chart of accounts, which that will then affect. When you're working with the QuickBooks IIF files, let me pull up one that has, give me one moment here. I've got one as an example. When you're pulling up a QuickBooks IIF file, what that does, this right here is an example of our end result of what we're creating today. What that does is it will specify within here the account that that line item needs to impact. QuickBooks allows you to vary that. You set a default for your products, but then you can vary it on your invoices. We have to pass that information back to QuickBooks as a part of this IIF file. So what we're going to do within our connection here is we're going to define what are our defaults for everything that's not a defined product. Unknown type right here, I would set this one up as some sort of miscellaneous item. Okay, this is if for some reason it doesn't fall, this is your ultimate catch-all. If for some reason it doesn't fall under shipping or tax or service or product or other discounts, this is your ultimate catch-all. What you're able to do is specify, let me go right here. The item name is the first thing that it asks for. And the item name is what name will be passed back to QuickBooks as the line item name. This item name needs to exist in QuickBooks. So if you're going to create an item here, I would create something that's a miscellaneous item. That exact name also has to be created in QuickBooks. Again, exact name, just like I was talking about the accounts up top. They have to match exactly. So do your names. Pretty much everything we're talking about here today has to connect exactly, character by character, okay? So again, I would copy this information from QuickBooks directly and paste it here. Now, as we go down through here, the item name, this is going to be the default name that it will pass this information across to QuickBooks as. And this is the default account that it will be passed as. I will recommend right here, past description as name, that you leave this as no, okay, on all of these down below. Now, we get to go through and set up these defaults for all of these different items. Shipping, many times in your chart of accounts, depending on how complex your chart of accounts are, many times you may have a separate chart of accounts for your shipping charges if you want to have those hit a different income account. Okay, so you can now specify a line item that will represent all of your shipping charges. Again, this line item needs to exist as an item in your item list in QuickBooks, and it needs to exist exactly as it's typed here. Leave this as no. Item account defaults, you're able to specify again which of your chart of accounts that this particular type of charge will affect. Shipping. So again, if you have a separate chart of accounts that you're going to track your shipping charges through, great, set that up here. Taxes, same thing. So a lot of this is going to be repetitive. I'm not going to go through all of these individually, each line item here, but I'll talk about each topic. Okay, so taxes. You do have the ability right here to tell us whether or not sales tax is enabled in QuickBooks, and then it will handle this a little bit differently in the export. So if you do have sales tax set up in QuickBooks, then you'll want to make sure that you check this as yes, or you can click no if that's not the case. Okay. Service and miscellaneous items. What this is looking at is any of your additional service charges that you might place on some manual orders. Products right here, again, this is your backup. This is your default for any product that you haven't mapped. I'm going to show you in just a moment how to map each of your individual products to link them up with between Infusionsoft and QuickBooks. But if you ever add a product to Infusionsoft that you have not yet mapped, what do you want it to map to? This is your backup. So again, set up a generic or a catch-all item. You may be able to call it product, or you can call it product general, something like that. Then you know that anytime that product is sold in QuickBooks, you know that there's something that's not mapped correctly in Infusionsoft. So that's your item name there. Again, your account default. Upsell products come across as a slightly different line item. Again, you're able to specify what you want that to be sold as. If you don't differentiate upsell products from your regular products that you sell, these may, as I had this previously, these may hit the exact same line items and the exact same account items. Finance charges. If you're going to charge any finance charges, if you're going to allow somebody to do a multiple pay, and you're going to charge an additional finance charge on that, oftentimes QuickBooks will set up for you a default chart of accounts specific for finance charges. So this one may hit your finance charges income line item, a chart of account. And again, you'll specify just a name within your line items. Now, once we start getting down into specials, special free trial days, order total, product, category, shipping, what you may notice on that is those correlate to the different types of discounts that you're able to apply. So when you are in your e-commerce setup option, let me pull that up here very quickly to demonstrate it. Discounts, free trials, and upsells, you'll notice within here that we have these order total discounts, product specific discount, product or shipping, subscription, category, and upsell. Okay, all of those options will pass across as a specific type. And that's what's shown here: upsell product, and then your special free trial, special order total, special product, and special category. For each one of those types of discounts, if you track those again through a different chart of accounts, a different account in your chart of accounts, then you can specify that here, and Infusionsoft will pass it to the correct area. Now, the last couple options here, program is for a payment plan. If you're breaking things down into a payment plan, subscription plan is if you're doing a recurring subscription. This is setting a default for your subscription plan, as opposed to the product that we set earlier. It treats those a little bit differently. And then you can specify what your date format is that you're utilizing within QuickBooks. You want to make sure that those match up. Now, this very last one is important. Allow colons in your invite M field. It may mean nothing to you. Let me tell you what the invite M field is. Let's go back over to one of these IIF files. The invite M field is right here. That is your line item name. That's your product name. Now, what some people do within their QuickBooks item lists is you will make something a subcategory. You'll make it a subcategory of another category so you can begin to organize your item list into different types of products or groups of products or categories of products. The way that then works, all of these that I've set up right here, I set up as not being a subcategory. All of these items are a main category, a main item. But when you create something as a category, the way it will need to be passed is this could be my, let me go down to this one, college books. I may have a category called books, and it will now put the category name, and it will put a colon, and then it will put the product name. So if you are using any sort of categorization within your item list, it's extremely important that you turn this on, allow colons in the invite M field. And then you need to pass that information, or you need to specify each of those products to include that colon as well. I'll demonstrate that here in a moment when we specify our products. Okay, but if you're using subcategories, within your item list in QuickBooks, it's important that you set this allow colons in invite M field as yes, because that will allow these to now match specifically the line item or the item in your item list from QuickBooks that you want it to link up to. Now, let's go back here. Sorry, I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Now, once you've completed all of this information, you can click the Save button down at the bottom. And now our general setup is complete. Okay, this is our general setup. Now we need to go in and set up product by product. Again, all this setup just needs to take place one time when you're setting it up, and then you will be able to export this information as you go. So if we come over here to the e-commerce products option, I'm going to open my products section. I'm going to filter down my list. I categorized a couple of them here as my QuickBooks example, so we could just look at a couple of those. Let me pull this one up. That is my my physics college book right here. Now, what you'll notice is there's a new tab that's been enabled. It says QuickBooks Information. And there's two things that it's asking for there. It says QuickBooks Product Name and QuickBooks Account Name. It's asking us for two different sets of information, both of which, again, they have to match exactly what you have in QuickBooks. Now, the QuickBooks product name right here does not have to match what you call it in Infusionsoft, although it may. It does not have to match what you call it in Infusionsoft. It does, however, have to match what you call it in QuickBooks. Now, let's go back over to let me see if I've got an item list here available. I exported an item list, an IIF item list here. Again, I recommend that you look at either exporting. I haven't exported the Excel option here in a while, so I don't recall if the Excel option would include those colons for subcategories. I would look at using the IIF file, because that way you're dealing in the same language that we're going to import it back into. Now, what I would recommend that you do is, again, you copy this directly from here. So right here underneath this name field is where you're going to have the item names. And we're looking for the QuickBooks product name. So that's what we're going to copy from directly. We will copy this here and paste it. Again, I didn't set up an example here of subcategories, but the way that it would appear, if I had a category in here of book, it would appear something like this. You want to copy that entire thing as well so that it copies correctly, it passes the information correctly back to QuickBooks. QuickBooks account name will appear right here. Okay, so if we just scroll across account, I could copy this one that says merchandise sales. That happens to be the account name that I have in my chart of accounts. Yours will be different. So now I can click Save. I will need to do that for each of my products that I have, that I sell through Infusionsoft, that I want to be able to pass to QuickBooks. So that's the setup. That's the process that you need to go through. There are two main portions that you need to go through. You have to configure the accounts. You have to configure the system-wide settings that will get turned on here underneath e-commerce settings. You'll have a new option down here called QuickBooks. And you need to go through, work with your accountant, and choose the appropriate charts of accounts to specify for each one of these. Choose the appropriate default catch-all options in case you forget to specify the product names for your products or for your subscriptions. Whatever the appropriate QuickBooks names are and QuickBooks accounts are, this is what they will fall back to in addition to everything that you don't specify, things like your shipping line items, your tax line items, your upsell line items, finance charges, specials, and discounts. You need to map all of those as well. Now, once you've set all of that up, here's the process that you begin to go through. When your sales are made, you can go here to e-commerce reports. And we do have an article that walks you through this one. Let me go pull that article up here so that you can see which one it is. How do I export an IIF file and use it to update QuickBooks? Now, what this is telling us is we're going to go to e-commerce reports, which I've just done. We're going to click on the all sales report and enter a specific date range. You may need to click on the start over to clear past search criteria. Now, here's what this is. This is an export import option. Okay, that's why I started off. I called it the QuickBooks connection. It's not an integration. This isn't an automatic thing where you're going to automatically push information from Infusionsoft to QuickBooks. This is something that you will need to go do an export. And how often you need to do the export is up to you and how much you're referencing your QuickBooks information. Here at Infusionsoft, we use this very process up until probably 4 years ago. We were a $17 million in revenue a year company before we shifted to another solution as far as our accounting platforms and otherwise. But this is something that we used, and our accountant would actually go through and do this on a daily basis because of the amount of transactions that we had flowing through things and the numbers that they needed to be seeing on a daily basis inside of QuickBooks. So he would do this on a daily basis. He'd walk through, and there's two things that we do. When you're importing your IIF files, QuickBooks does not allow you to import your orders and your payments and have them connected. So we're going to go through, I'm going to show you how to export from Infusionsoft your orders, export from Infusionsoft your payments, and then I'll describe to you how you go put those together. You have to now sync those up within QuickBooks. So we can go right here to the all sales report. And when you pull up the all sales report, what you will want to do is you will want to click start over, and you will want to search by a specific date range based on the last time that you did an export. Now, here's what I'm going to recommend. Today being, let's see, the 25th, Thursday the 25th, I would not pull a report that includes today because I may have some that have already been some orders that have already been processed today. I'll have orders that'll be processed the rest of the day. I don't want to have to try and split those in the future. So I would pull the soonest date would be yesterday because that day's completed. So I would go through and pull everything perhaps up through yesterday or month to date and say search. And that will pull me all of the sales that have taken place in that date range. And then I can click actions, and this new option is enabled once you have this QuickBooks connection turned on. And I can say export in IIF format and then click OK. And what it will do is it will give me an export file here. That file, if I go open it, looks like that gibberish that I was just showing you earlier. And again, if you open those IIF files, it likely won't know what to open them with. You'll have to tell it to go open with Microsoft Excel. Now, in my experience, I like to delete this first line item, this empty row. I'm not sure why it's there. I've talked to a couple of developers. I'm going to see if we can get that removed. I haven't been able to get that happening here yet. But in my experience, I like to remove that top line item so you don't have an empty row. But notice here what this now contains. This contains all the details of my orders, what was sold. Okay, it contains the total cost here. any discounts that might have taken place, sales tax items, order total discounts. It contains all of the information related to that order. We can then take this and import it into QuickBooks. Again, I don't have a QuickBooks computer here at Infusionsoft that I'm able to demonstrate this import on. I will work on creating a screencast of that I can post in conjunction with this video once I've posted it, so you can see the other half of things. But this is what Infusionsoft will provide you with that you can then import into QuickBooks. So this is the QuickBooks IIF file. This will contain all of your orders from that date range. Now, the second half is you want to pull all of the payments. So you'll go here to the e-commerce reports, and you can go to the payments report. And that will show all payments that have been made. Again, you would want to search, start over. You would want to search by the same date range that you just pulled all the orders for. And you'll always want to make sure that those date ranges cover all dates. So my next report that I would pull, if this one pulled through the 24th, my next report would start on the 25th and go through whatever that current date was. So I can search by that information, and that would show me any payments that have been made. In this particular case, let me edit that to include today because I just made some payments today. Here we go. So again, what I can do is then export that IIF format. And it will export those payments, which now will look a little bit different. These ones now talk about the payments, and they'll show me what that payment was that has been made and received through Infusionsoft. And now we'll be able to import those payments into QuickBooks as well. So we have two lists here. We're importing the orders, and we're importing the payments. Now, once you've done that, what you are then able to do is take each of those individual files. And this is the part that I can't demonstrate that I'll cover in an additional video that I'll post. You open QuickBooks. There are a few things that you have to do. In order to do an IIF file import, you have to be in single user mode. You can't be in multi-user mode. So that really impacts those that are using Enterprise Edition, or have other people that are using QuickBooks with them. You have to make sure that you go into single user mode, and you have to be logged in as an administrator on the file. Once you log into that, once you've opened the file in single user mode as an administrator, you can go to the file option, utilities, and there's an option import, and you can import an IIF file. Going back to what I said in the very beginning, before you do that, always make sure you run a backup. Backup. Always make sure you run a backup. Because if something goes wrong with that file for some reason, especially on your first ones that you're testing with, okay, always run on a backup, but especially run on a backup your very first time as you're testing this out to make sure that things, I said run on a backup. I meant always run a backup. Have a backup file in case something happens, something wrong happens, then you can restore your backup and you're A-okay. Okay, always run a backup before you do an import. But then what you're able to do is use that utilities import IIF file, and it will import this file, and it will create these as invoices within QuickBooks for you. No more double data entry, no mistakes from double data entry, no more wasting that time from trying to enter all the information that you might have got from QuickBooks or from Infusionsoft into QuickBooks. You can simply do this export, dump that into QuickBooks, and you're all set. Now, you do that once for the orders, and you do that once for the payments option as well. Now, once you've imported the payments, there's one additional thing that you need to do. When you are in QuickBooks, now you need to go in and match up the payment to the invoice. And you're going to do that within QuickBooks by going to the Customers tab, and you're going to click on Receive Payments. And what that will allow you to do is take those payments that we've now imported and the orders that we've imported, and you can begin to associate them. That will happen for your one-time payments. That also comes in extremely handy when you have a payment plan system set up within Infusionsoft. So if you're doing a 3-pay on a particular product, this month when I do that export from Infusionsoft into QuickBooks, the first payment will come along with the invoice. Next month, I'll just get the payment. And the following month, I'll get the payment as well. Those following months, I will simply link them to the original invoice. Now, there's one other thing that I want to make you aware of that may be a point of difference on some of these exports. Because the orders and the invoice information is pulling from a different table than the payment information, sometimes you will see a discrepancy between the names that these are associated with. On your orders, it will pull the contact name, first name and last name. The contact that's associated with the order, that's the information that will be pulled with the orders. On the payment side, it will actually be pulling the credit card name. So if those are different, whatever the name is on the credit card, if it was paid by credit card, then that may be a point of difference. So that's something to be aware of when you're going into the receive payments portion. You're then able to, from the receive payments portion, you may have some discrepancies there, but that's how you'll resolve those. If you ever have a question on where the payment was or who it came from, you'll simply be able to click through. Let me go back here, sale shopping cart. This right here shows you the payment information, and I can click right here, open job in the background. That actually opens up the order information in the first place. So that's really the overview here of the connection here between Infusionsoft and QuickBooks. That's what enables us to now take all the information, take the sales, take the payments that we are tracking, export that from Infusionsoft, place that, import that into QuickBooks. So the QuickBooks is then able to run all of the accounting, and you then have all of the important information that you can gather, not just your sales and payments, but also all of your expenses and employee payments, all of the other financial data within your company. You can now manage in addition to the information that you're gathering here from Infusionsoft. So I want to go through and take some questions. I know there's a lot of questions on this one. There's a lot of details that have been that are very specific to doing this import. Again, the biggest thing that I can recommend that you do is run backups, involve your accountant, and have patience when you're doing the setup on this one, because it will likely fail the first time you do it. Okay, and you'll need to go in and make some tweaks and take a look at, okay, did I add an extra space here on the account, or what's going on there? As well as a reminder that our team here can't provide support on making the import work into QuickBooks, or we cannot provide any advice on which of your chart of accounts that you need to utilize or select in order to pass information across to. You need to work with your accountant on that. So let me hit a couple things here. Questions that popped up were, where do we get the fax or the paper that we need to fax back in? Where I would recommend you go is go to help.infusionsoft.com, and I'll actually post this out to Twitter here shortly. But this is where you can go to get all of the documentation that we have regarding our QuickBooks connection. You can click Find an Instant Answer, and then just search by QuickBooks. How does Infusionsoft integrate with QuickBooks? That's the first one that we want to look at. And it gives you a very short description here. What happens, the integration gives you the ability to export invoices and payment data, and use it to update QuickBooks. Be sure to back up your QuickBooks data. And then right here is the file that you will need to download, sign, and send back into us, and our team will go turn on this feature for you. Okay. Now, let me post this out real quick on my Twitter account. That's twitter.com/Scott Richens. So you can go access that information. In addition to that one article, there's about 4 other articles here that walk you through how do you set up the QuickBooks integration. Okay, and that's what I took you through here initially. How do I export an IIF file and use it to update QuickBooks? There's one other thing here. How do I find a list of sales by their QuickBooks status? Now, you may find that this works out great for you. Instead of trying to remember the date ranges of when you did exports, you may choose to use this option. You can go to the reports option and go to all sales reports. There's another feature, another status that we turn on, edit criteria columns, and that is the QuickBooks status. Export status, has it been downloaded, imported, or neither? Okay, so what you may want to do is say, I want something that hasn't been downloaded, imported, or had an error. Okay, which means I want all of the new orders. You could then click OK, and it would pull that. Okay, I don't have any that meet that criteria, but that may be a way for you to pull all of your new, not just sales, but also your payments. Let's see. Let me go through some of the questions here. I want to ask one question on this. I will be going through and answering questions, but we like to get an idea. How would you rate the content here on today's call? Give me some feedback on that one while I go through the questions. Let me know if this has been helpful with what we've covered here. Brenda asked earlier if this works with the Canadian version. Brenda, I'm not certain. I've not dealt with a Canadian version of QuickBooks. I would invite you, if you want to test it out, then that would be great. The first thing that I would check out there, Brenda, rather than wasting time doing a lot of setup here, I would just doing some investigation into importing into the Canadian version from an IIF file and make sure that that looks like what the Infusionsoft export would look like. All right, I'll go ahead and close that poll here. Okay, awesome. Thank you for your feedback there. Let's see. Still going through some of these. Monique, thanks for the feedback there. Andrew asked a question here, and I don't know if Andrew's still with us here, but he asked a question early on and let me know he was going to be bailing early. Andrew said, I wanted to ask if it's possible to map certain products to certain QuickBooks classes. My understanding with the IIF imports is that it does not support classes. I was doing some reading on this in preparation, really trying to dig deeper into the IIF files, and something that I came across, I believe, said you cannot import QuickBooks classes. So I don't think that that's something you're going to be able to do. Ian asked, will Infusionsoft communicate with SAP B1? Ian, I am unaware of an export that exports it in the SAP format. Now, if it can do anything with the IIF format that we have here from QuickBooks, then you may be onto something. But I believe that's a proprietary thing for QuickBooks. Again, just covering here. Nick asked about QuickBooks Enterprise version. Nick, yes, it does work with QuickBooks Enterprise version. Linda QuickBooks does not show up on my e-commerce settings menu. That is correct. We do not turn that on until you have downloaded and signed and returned this QB disclaimer waiver. That is really the biggest thing about it is you've got to back up. There is no undo when you do an import from QuickBooks. And where this came from is there were a number of people that we turned this on for. They didn't follow the advice of us saying you have to run a backup before you do an import. And as they were getting things set up, some things didn't work properly. So we had to go to a point here where we said, no, you're responsible. We need you to make sure you run a backup because there isn't an undo and there's nothing that we can do to fix it. So it's not that it doesn't work. It's not the import doesn't work. It's that it takes a little bit of tweaking sometimes to make it import properly. And until you get it to that point, you can't do an undo. So you'll need to restore a backup if something goes wrong. Linda said, has the form link been disabled on purpose? Linda, I'm not certain on that one. I'm not sure which form you're referencing there. So let me know. Greg said, do you recommend any third-party tools for QuickBooks Online? Greg, I have not done research or used any of those personally, so I don't have any recommendations to make. In my experience, I've only used the desktop versions of QuickBooks. Brett said, do you know if QuickBooks Online Pro has the option for IIF import? Brett, when I was chatting with our accountant who used to do all of this stuff, I was working with him in preparation for this presentation. He made the comment that QuickBooks Online Pro does allow you to import IIF. I tried to do some research and I was not able to find anything to corroborate that, but that's what he stated. So Brett, you may check that one out. It may be possible to use this with QuickBooks Online if you're using the professional edition. Amy said she's using Consolibyte to integrate with the QuickBooks app. Does this replace that service? That is a product that is in the marketplace that I believe automates this export-import process. Again, I've never used that one personally, but these are counterparts. You use one or the other. Jim said, if this is a connection option, how is it different with the third-party app that allows for integration? Yeah, Jim, that's the, I think that's the same thing there, the Consolibyte option. Again, on that one, I'm always cautious to designate it as an integration. In my mind, an integration would be something that's automatic and doesn't include an export or import. So the connection that we've got here, the reason I keep calling it a connection is you can connect Infusionsoft to QuickBooks by mapping things, and now you can export from Infusionsoft and import into QuickBooks, and that can save you a lot of time with your data entry. But it's not a two-way synchronization or integration. You can't pull things from QuickBooks and put them into Infusionsoft. It's a one-way from Infusionsoft to QuickBooks, and when you're using what I've demonstrated here, it's a manual export-import process. Michael said, within my chart of accounts, I have separate subcategories, for example, various types of sales, U.S., foreign, wholesale, retail promo, etc. Can I be this specific and create these subcategories when setting this up in Infusionsoft? Michael, if you are looking at, it sounds like you're basically wanting these sales to hit different charts of accounts or different accounts depending on where the sale takes place, and that's not something that you're able to vary the accounts based on. You can vary the accounts based on each individual product, but not the manner in which it was sold necessarily. Angela said, missed the beginning part of this. Is the integration free? Yeah, it is something that's built into Infusionsoft. There is not an extra fee for this. It is something that you just need to download this particular file, sign that, and send that back to us, fax it back to us, and then our team will get that turned on for you. Mary asked, are there additional reports available once this setup has been done? Yeah, Mary, there are not additional reports, but there is an additional filter on your reports. And that's what I was just demonstrating here. You probably asked the question before I demonstrated it, but I'll hit it again. And that is this QuickBooks status. And you're able to track the export status. If you've exported it, then it knows here that it's been downloaded. Okay. What you can also do is, let's say, for example, let me start over here and pull a particular report. Let's say I pulled a report and I exported this. Well, then it would be marked as exported. What I could also do once I've imported it is I could come back here and say, update the QuickBooks export status. And that will update all of these to the status of imported. So once I've completed the import, I can take that same list and update it to say that it's now been imported. And you can begin to track your status of those reports in relation to QuickBooks. Laura said, after you set this up and you start getting things in your catch-all accounts, can you go back and remap them? Laura, yes, you can. And that's the whole point of setting up the catch-all accounts. Is the goal is to, especially for your products that should have accounts designated. So for example, your product catch-all line item and account. If something is ever sold under that line item, you'll want to go back in and find where did it come from? What product isn't mapped, and then go in and map that product in Infusionsoft. Additionally, what you can do, if you would like to, in QuickBooks is update that line item on your invoice within QuickBooks. Brett, it looks like Brett did some reconnaissance for us on his previous questions. He said he found an answer about importing IIF files into QuickBooks Online Pro. He's using Plus, and with Online, you can't import the IIF files. And then it mentions there's some particular options, finding some third-party solutions. So it does sound like third-party solutions are needed there. Thanks, Brett, for getting that information over to us. Michael said, is there a limit within Infusionsoft to the number of products and items, products or items, or chart of accounts and subcategories I can set up in Infusionsoft? Michael, I don't believe that there is a limit to what you can place within there. There is an optimal status, and where the optimal part comes from, the optimal number, I've often said don't exceed 500. Where that primarily comes from, though, is if you're using our storefront. The storefront isn't necessarily optimized from a navigational perspective to handle more than a few hundred products or 500 products. It gets a little bit more complex at that point. And so that's more of where that recommendation comes from. I know I have had folks that have had very complex storefronts that they run through like Magento, and they integrate that with Infusionsoft, and it creates all of those products in Infusionsoft. And I haven't seen them have problems with that. Konstantinos asked the question here, what is the reason we need to sign the IIF disclaimer? On that one, again, Konstantinos, if you read that disclaimer, the biggest thing, if I open that one here, the biggest thing that it's saying is it's strongly recommended that you back up your QuickBooks data before the import process. Accordingly, you're advised that you use this feature at your own risk. Because you cannot undo the import, you have to make sure you run the backup. So it's something to make sure that both parties here, you and us, are covered, and we're very clear on the expectations when you're using this. It's not that we're saying it doesn't work, but as you've seen here through the demonstration, there are a number of spots where I said things have to be set up very specifically. Your names throughout here on your product names and your account names, they have to match exactly. You can't have an extra space. You can't have a period on a product or an apostrophe on a product in one spot and not the other. They have to match exactly what you have within QuickBooks, or it won't import properly, and you can't undo the import. So the key to that is you have to be responsible. We can't be responsible, but you have to be responsible for running a backup every time you do this. Like I said, in my previous job, I lived in QuickBooks. I spent way too many hours in QuickBooks and IIF files. Prior to me ever being here with Infusionsoft, I have dealt with these. I've dealt with these issues, and I'll tell you, I've learned this the hard way. I've been the person who didn't run the backup and went, oh no, what do I do now? So this is something to just make it extremely clear. You need to make sure you run that backup. And as long as you understand that, and you understand that we can't fix it if you don't run the backup, and we can't fix it if you do run the backup, you just restore the backup. That's where that comes into play. That then, if you understand that, then we'll turn it on for you. Does that make sense there? Like I said, we use this export import process for Infusionsoft all the way up until we were running 17 million a year in revenue. It works. We've used it ourselves. So the biggest thing is just the clarity, and it's because it uses the IIF file import. Okay, that's the only way to import invoices and payments, and it's finicky to say the least. Okay, like I said, I've used it for years. It does take some tweaking and making sure you get all of your settings set properly, and so that's where the disclaimer on that comes into play. Laura said, "How often do you need to do the export imports for the reports?" Laura. Laura, that's going to depend on you. If you're the kind of person that's looking at your numbers in QuickBooks every day, well, then you may need to do the export every day. And the export process really doesn't take too much. I mean, basically what you're going to do is you'll pull up your all sales report, hit edit criteria, pull the appropriate date range, and then download it. And then you'll pull the payments, you'll open that, pull the appropriate date range, download it. Again, I would recommend once you've downloaded it, that you make sure you open it once and delete the top line item. Again, I'm not sure why it's there. In my experience prior to being here, I wouldn't leave that one in. I would just delete that and save it. And it's going to throw you some errors on this one. It's okay. Just hit continue. Excel doesn't know how to deal with an IIF file format. So you can save that, and then you go over to QuickBooks. Again, I would recommend you run a backup before you do an import. You can import that, and then you can go through and import your orders and import your payments. Again, through the IIF file import, I was again doing some reading here earlier, and from the Intuit site, it says you cannot create a link between two transactions. So if one's an invoice and one's a payment, through the import process, you are unable to link the two. And so what's actually going to happen is it will import the invoice, it will import the payment, and then you go into QuickBooks, and the last thing that you just need to do is connect those by going to customers and then down to receive payments, and you can apply the payments that you received against each invoice. Nadal said, yes, this will work with the Canadian version. So awesome. Thanks for the feedback there, Nadal. Carrie, would I talk directly with the accounting firm to explain this? Carrie, I can't talk directly to them. What I would recommend if you want to is have them check out this recording as far as what we've walked through and the documentation that we have. And from that, they should be able to work that part out. Again, the biggest part is making sure your accounts are lined up appropriately. Okay, you need to choose here within e-commerce settings, and then you go to QuickBooks. These accounts, you want to make sure that they're hitting the appropriate accounts, and we do have some descriptions of each of these within the Help Center. Michael asks, can the export status choices be customized, or are the choices limited to what Infusionsoft has set up? Michael, I believe they are limited to what we have set up. Constantinos asks, can we also receive payments via ACH and upload to QuickBooks? For those of you that don't know, ACH is Automated Clearinghouse. That's like an electronic check or something where they give you the routing number and otherwise. Constantinos, I don't believe, well, I know that through Infusionsoft you cannot receive payments through ACH. So if you are receiving payments otherwise outside of Infusionsoft through ACH, that would be something you'd have to figure out through that service or that system, and if you could export that information and import it to QuickBooks. That you can't do it through Infusionsoft, and so any way that you achieve that would be something that's out of my realm of expertise. Susan was also saying she's imported IIF files in Canadian QuickBooks as well. Kevin, thanks for the feedback here. Brenda said, and I think Brenda was the one that asked earlier, Brenda said she recalled somebody at InfusionCon a few years ago saying they did an export-import with macros, but it was only available on the US QuickBooks. So Brenda, again, I'm not an expert on that one. We've got a couple folks here that are saying that it does work, so you may want to test that one out. Nadal said you also need to add to the IIF file if the item is inventory or a service. Now, I want to check that one out here real quick. Let's see. I think Nadal, so there are different item types that you can create within QuickBooks. Okay, it can be your inventory item, your service item, other charges. It could be sales tax, groups or items, or there's a lot of different options there. A non-inventory item is another one. Nadal, I don't believe that you have to specify that in our export. And here's why. I believe as long as this invite M is correct, as long as that matches exactly the inventory item, I believe you can import this and it links up with that. Sorry, I said inventory item. I meant the item list. As long as this matches exactly the name in the item list, I don't believe in the IIF file that you have to specify that it's an inventory part or a non-inventory part. I believe it just adapts that on the import. It connects up with the appropriate line item through the name, and then it pulls in the correct information. If you know otherwise there, Nadal, let me know. But in my experience, that wasn't something that we had to import on this particular invoice option. Marcia said, can you import products or payments into QuickBooks prior to creating an invoice in QuickBooks? How does the data match up in QuickBooks if the invoice is not yet created? Let me read this again. Marcia, when you are importing the order, so if you go to the all sales order, or the all sales report, and you export that information from Infusionsoft. Okay, so if we go to Infusionsoft and we pull up the reports, the order reports, and we go to the all sales report and export that, that's exporting the invoice that when we import it into QuickBooks, it will create the invoice. So, Marcia, I don't think you need to create anything in QuickBooks before you create the invoice. You certainly don't have to create the invoice in QuickBooks before you create the invoice in Infusionsoft or import it. The import from Infusionsoft will create the invoice in QuickBooks. What you do have to have in QuickBooks prior to doing the import is you've got to make sure that those products exist in QuickBooks and the chart of accounts exist. Does that help clarify it there, Marcia? I may have missed your question, and if so, please clarify for me. Amy gives a shout out to Consolibyte here again. That's something found within our marketplace. It's a third party system that helps with connecting Infusionsoft and QuickBooks and does some automation there. Sandy asked, does Infusionsoft handle multiple currencies? No, it doesn't. So we don't handle multiple currencies, therefore we don't export multiple currencies to QuickBooks. Great question there. Michael asked, once I have all the matching set up, can I import from QuickBooks to Infusionsoft all the old sales or customers, et cetera, which predate my use of Infusionsoft? Michael, the answer on that one's going to be no. This connection is designed to be a one-way data push from from Infusionsoft to QuickBooks. Mary said, we track our sales in QuickBooks by category. Is there a report that would provide that information? Mary, are you asking for that report in QuickBooks or that report in Infusionsoft? If it's in QuickBooks, I can't help you there. You probably know that report already. In Infusionsoft, you're not going to be able to pull a report based on your QuickBooks categories. If you categorize things within Infusionsoft using the Infusionsoft categories the same way that you use them in QuickBooks, then I believe you can pull some category type reports. But really what I would do if you're wanting those same types of reports that you have in QuickBooks, I would just export the information from Infusionsoft, import it into QuickBooks, and pull those same reports directly there within QuickBooks. You can make sure that the products as they're passing across receive that same category that already exists there within QuickBooks so that you mirror that same setup. Brenda asked, does Infusionsoft refer to invoice debit account to mean a true invoice, not a sales receipt? Is there a link that handles sales receipts, meaning payment at the time of the sale, whereas invoice is a bill with an outstanding payment to be paid later? It looks like invoice and Infusion means the same thing on both. Brenda, I believe it means the same thing on both. When it comes to the invoice debit account, when I was working with our accountant, he clarified that's just your accounts receivable option there. So within Infusionsoft, an invoice is created for something that's paid up front, and it's just marked as paid. An invoice is also created for something that's created with payment plans. So those are treated the same way. Nadal said there is some concern there on his part on the inventory items. So Nadal, I'll test that one out. I hadn't done tests here with inventory items on this particular one, so I'll take a look at that and see what's going on there. But Nadal, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and drop me an email. Let's make sure we're in touch on that one. You may be able to help me out there if you've had some more recent experience. So I just shot you my email address. All right, looks like I'm about to the end of the questions here. So feel free to slip in any other questions that you might have before we close down. But again, I appreciate y'all being out here today for this particular session. The information as far as accessing this QuickBooks connection and the setup configuration, you'll want to make sure that you download and fill out the form that we have posted on our Help Center. I just tweeted that out to my Twitter account. If you go to twitter.com/ScottRichens, feel free to check that out. How does Infusionsoft integrate with QuickBooks? you can click through on that and then download that file, send that file back into us. I'm not sure how quick our turnaround is. Usually it's a day or so, but that may also depend on how many of you choose to take advantage of this particular option. Again, the biggest thing that I can stress, run backups. Run backups, run backups. You got to back up your QuickBooks. Every time you do an import, those IIF file imports, you cannot undo those. So always run a backup before you import one of those files. Better safe than sorry there. How soon will the recording be available? I need to get it converted, and I can post this recording here probably by the end of the day. It'll take me a little bit more time to get a second recording of the actual import process so that you see that and you see how to connect things up. So I'll work on getting that one added as well. But as for right now, this particular recording I should be able to have up by the end of the day. Beverly, you don't have to be on Twitter there to access it. So you can just view everything I've posted on Twitter. You don't have to have a Twitter account. So that's all I've got here today. Again, thank you so much for being here. One last reminder, be sure to work with your accountants on these. Okay, get the advice of your accountant so that you make sure you're setting things up properly, that you're selecting the correct charts of accounts. Please remember my request and my advice on this. Our technical support team cannot offer advice on selecting your chart of accounts. They can't offer advice on the importing into QuickBooks. Those are some things that they're not trained on. They don't have QuickBooks, and they are not experts on that part of it. That's the part that we do not support. So I need you to work with your accountants there on that particular side, and make sure that you can troubleshoot with them on anything that might be taking place. Again, thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys have a great day and that you've found this one very helpful, that it helps you start reducing any of the double data entry that might be taking place, or if you're not doing that right now, perhaps this will give you some more power in your accounting and your reporting that you're able to do on that. So thanks so much for being here. Hope you guys have a great day, great afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you on a future call.